Welcome back to another session. I hope you were well. In today's session, I address and I cover another archetype of relationships the men should avoid. The topic, therefore, is women who were not taught, women who were not raised to be wives, women who were not raised to be wives and mothers. Let me preface, as I have done in the respective sessions that I have covered. I am speaking to men. I'm speaking to men over 35. I'm speaking to men specifically who are in the top 5 to 10% of all men. I'm not addressing all men. I'm hoping to address the top elite, those who want to be in the what we call the fat tails of a distribution. Now, let me start today's session by addressing two or separating what I intend to cover into two parts. In relation to women who were not raised to be wives or mothers, but specifically wives, there are two camps. I'm going to address two camps. Firstly, not all men want to have children. There are men who want to be competitive, successful, driven, ambitious, and who do not want to have children. There are other men who are of all of such virtues who want to have a family. So two separate camps. In any case, what we tend to find is that both could reside in the same group. So I would try to address and prioritize wives over motherhood. Now, it's important to recognize that I make a very clear distinction between dating and relationship. Men can date whoever they want. I think it's up to you to decide the timeline you devote to dating. But when it comes to relationships, because we pay as men the highest penalty, that we carry the highest liability with regards to marriage, which is my gold standard for relationships, the vetting process and the review process and the selection process cannot be similar to when you are dating. It's important, therefore, to be more careful. That is what this session is all about, and the sessions, or rather the series, and the sessions that I have covered in the past, including today, is all about. Now, in order for me to articulate what I hope to share with you, I'm going to talk about two effectively groups, or separate my conversation into two parts: actions and attitude. Women who were not raised to be wives, you can identify such women in two ways: by their actions and by their attitude. It's much easier to identify someone by their actions because our results or our outcomes are used as measuring yardsticks rather than our attitude. For example, if I met you or if you met me in person, within the first few seconds of meeting me, you would be able to draw some inferences, some conclusions. Some will be speculations about what you think about me. On the other hand, if we started to converse and if I started to share a lot more about myself, you might have to change your position as you develop and learn more based on my attitude. Therefore, and here is the difficulty for most men. Most young men say, well, I don't know how to identify such women before it's too late. Most men start dating and they transition to relationships. Unfortunately, they're emotionally committed, and therefore it's harder to separate once sex, intimacy, affection has started. But it's possible to identify women who were not raised to be wives at the start of the dating process, before you start moving down the path of a relationship. Here are a few actions that you can use to judge women based on the results that they have. Number one, women who have, and I'm not going to put this in any chronological sequence or order. Number one, women who have children and who have children out of wedlock. A woman who has had a child or children out of wedlock was not raised to be a wife, because women who were raised to be wives wait and do things in the right order. You get married, then you have children. So a woman who's had children out of wedlock, effectively signaling to the marketplace that she was not raised to be a wife. The reason being that there are over 23 forms of birth control. And if all those birth control procedures and methods and options fail, there is still the opportunity to terminate. You can choose not to bring the baby to term. Women who were raised to be wives understand that their value in the marketplace declines rapidly if they fail to use the 23 forms of birth control, and if they choose to bring the baby to term, that the quality of men they can attract declines very, very rapidly. Number two, women who have cohabited with other men in the past. Perhaps, I'm not necessarily sure that people in the West might agree with this because it's become a norm. Outside of the West, in parts of, say, Africa, India, certain parts of Brazil, definitely parts of the Oriental part of Asia, and Far East and Southeast, the idea that a woman, unmarried to a man, moves in with another man or with a man and cohabits with him as though they are husband and wife is frowned upon by the community for various reasons. The community wants to protect the woman's chastity, purity, wants to protect the father's name, her name, but most importantly, wants to ensure that things are done in the right way. In the West, we have taken this pathway where once you're dating someone, the next step is to move in with them. So in many ways, you give yourself, your body, your spirit, your presence, all of you to a person you were dating without the person paying the highest price. And women who have moved in with men and who have cohabited with men have no new memories. Many of them have been customized for the men that they've lived with. For example, you meet a woman, she's 27, but for example, let's assume in this particular instance, from 19, she's lived with a man up until 23, and then separated with the man, and then moved in with another man at 23 up until 27 before they separated again. It indicates that she's actually been customized to two different men. You see, there was a time when the woman left her father's house and moved to her husband's house, and so it was a new experience for the men. It was a new experience for the woman. It was a new experience for the father of the bride, and it was a new experience for the father of bridegroom, because the boy also left the father's house. At the same time, you had two families, a man, a woman, and his two families, let's say a young man and a young woman, and they decide to come together in union. The boy leaves his father's house, the woman leaves her father and mother's house, they come together, they form a new home. In the UK particularly, it's part of the norm. As a matter of fact, when you start dating someone, people tend to think that there's something wrong if you're not living with your boyfriend. Women who do such things were not raised to be wives, because wives understand that their value declines, depreciates, when they give themselves completely to a man. There are certain things you have to hold back. One of which is that the whole idea of cohabiting with someone should be as part of a trial marriage. It shouldn't last more than 6 months. You don't move in with a man except he's proposed to you already. And if you move in with him, there has to be a condition that you can't live with him for more than 6 months. Men have to be held to higher standards because otherwise men accept whatever women offer. And for some reason, women who, particularly in the West, have been dropping the standards of social interactions and intersexual dynamics to the lowest common denominator. Sex is happening, sometimes sex with multiple partners. A family is being formed prior to marriage. No one is asking for a hand in marriage. The woman moves with the man into the man's home or vice versa. And they cohabit, or they cohabit as though they're married. So that's number two. Number one was women who have had children out of wedlock. Number two, women who have cohabited with other men. Number three is particularly very important. Women who have an excessive body count above the threshold. I'll say that again. Women with a high body count above the threshold. I hope the question you're thinking is, what is the threshold? What does that mean? Well, I have a formula that I use. It's the same formula, well, it's a similar adjusted type of formula that I have used either to ascertain whether as a man you're overweight or as a woman you're overweight. But the formula is simple. Take your age, subtract from your age, the age of consent in the country where you were raised and where you live. I prefer where you were raised until you became an adult. The number you get is the top limit, the high limit of what your body count should be. Divide a number by 2, and that is the low limit of what your body count should be. You then have a range, a low limit range and a high limit range. Now, I understand that if you live in the West, people start having sex much earlier. So if you want to err on the side of caution, I have no objections in placing perhaps a 10% limit on both sides, plus or minus. So for example, let's assume that you're 28. You live in the UK, age of consent 18, 28 less 18 is 10. The maximum body count that you should be 10, all things remaining equal. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So you should have between 5 and 10 as your body count in terms of sexual partners that you've had. Now think about this carefully. At 18, if you start having sex, people do not go into sex. They usually start having some form of intimacy or relationship. If you've had a maximum body count of 10, it indicates that you've had one sexual partner every single year. Every 12 months, you've changed your sexual partner. That is excessive for a woman. Even for a man, it is excessive. Way too much. On the other hand, if it's 5, it means that every 2 years, every 24 months, you've changed your sexual partners. Again, that is also excessive, particularly and primarily that a woman's value is high as the younger she is. Purity, chastity, fertility, beauty, youth. And you're giving your value to men who will not pay the highest price. The more sexual partners a woman has, the lower her value in the marketplace. And the lower she is to be considered as wife material. Now, when it comes to dating and having sex, she might be perfect for short-term interactions. But as a wife, there is something called pair bonding. The ability that both of you will pair. You see, experience is a two-edged sword. Many young women would say, and many men would say, well, I do not want someone who is actually inexperienced. Well, the question is, where do you draw the line? If one experience is okay, then how about 100? Now, most men will tell you, well, they draw a line somewhere. They might say, well, they do not want a woman who is, and women would also make the same argument. Well, a woman has to have experience and know what she likes. In which case, I put it back to you, which is, if 10 is acceptable, why not 200? And why not 300? After all, it doesn't really matter. At some point, it does matter. And if it does matter at 300 sexual partners at 28, then by the same logic, it means that there is an extreme, and therefore there has to be something that is tolerable. Now, I'm not suggesting women should be virgins at 18. I'm not suggesting a woman should be virgin for her to be considered as a wife. I am saying, based on an age-adjusted basis, there has to have been some level of decorum and chastity on the woman's part in selectively choosing the right man, recognizing that with every sexual partner she had, she increased the risk of actually reproducing for the man. And she risked her life for all the various reasons, sexually transmitted diseases, etc., etc. Number 4. Now, okay, I should have said something. In terms of the limit, plus or minus 10%, it would mean a woman who's 28 should go between 5 and 10 partners, sexual partners. That number might go up to 11, or it might drop down to 4, plus or minus 1. Let me say something that I think is important so you can understand. The younger the woman is, the less sexual partners she should have, the lower her body count. I'm going to say something controversial. A woman, once you get to 35 and actually above 30, the selection pool declines rapidly. A woman who is 30 cannot compete with her 20-year-old self. And therefore, with regard to sexual partners, a woman who is 30 or 35 and over, recognizing that she has less leverage in the marketplace, going into the marketplace to find a suitable man, competitive, driven, successful, a man in the top 5 to 10%, would have to give something. Sometimes it might be sex. Men who are competitive, driven, successful, who meet a woman who is 20, who is a virgin, might be happy to court and date her without sex, because he understands he's getting the ultimate prize. The same man meets a woman who is 35, and he's thinking, well, other people have, you're not new to this rodeo. Other people have been here and done that. I need to have mine as quickly as possible. So, as a strategy for women, she should give sex less the younger she is, because that's the highest time her value in the marketplace is actually seen as worthy of exchange. But as she ages, generally speaking, beauty lasts about 12 years, from 18 to 30. And then it starts to decline. Doesn't mean you're not beautiful after 30, but geriatric pregnancy begins at 35. Men stop seeing women who are 35 and over the same way they see women who are younger. So from 35 and over, you might find that as a woman, you're going to have to give sex away a lot more than you did the younger you are. Primarily, you're trying to score the best deal. And effectively, you can't compete based on youth. You can't compete based on beauty. You can't compete based on fertility. You can't compete based on chastity. But men will accept whatever you offer as an exchange. So a woman who has a high body count, and it's particularly that body count occurs the younger she is, the less she is qualified to be a wife from the perspective of pair bonding. And here is the difficult part, which I do not cover in today's session. As a man looking for a wife, how do you determine and know what a woman's body count is? You cannot know, but you can infer. And I have covered this in other sessions. Now let me move to number 4, women who are 30 and over. And here is the reason. Women who are raised to be wives and who know what they need to do to be chosen are not on the marketplace for too long. They get chosen very early, because such women understand the following: the value exchange proposition, in other words, what they bring to the table. Number 2, they know how to get in proximity around the men that they want. Number 3, competition, they know how to compete. Number 4, they know how to retain a man once they have attracted the man. Number 5, they know how to please, cooperate, and get along with the man. Such women are always chosen before 30. Women who are 30 and over, who are unmarried, but who want to be married, here's a clue, here's a sign. There's a possibility you were not raised, you were not taught, you were not trained to be a wife, and you've therefore navigated the sexual marketplace and the dating scene based on your experience alone. Whereas women who were taught and groomed and raised to be wives know what to do. They get in line, like I talked about yesterday. They stay in line, they meet the right men, and they exit the dating scene. They're not waiting for the best deal. They choose the offer based on what's available at the time, and they choose properly. You see, good men always seek good women, and it doesn't matter whether and where you're from. Women who were raised to be wives get chosen very quickly. Number 5, and this is where I move on to attitude. Women with a low non-sexual marketplace value. The question is, what is non-sexual marketplace value? Well, it covers and it captures so many things. But perhaps I'll use a heuristic that might be useful for the conversation. When we talk about women who are feminine, we tend to mix feminine women or feminine with femininity. Most young men, in choosing a woman, tend to judge that a woman is feminine based on how she dresses, or based on how she walks, or generally based on the traits that women of old had. I don't even consider things such as skills within the home, to be feminine. Women who were raised to be wives have a high non-sexual marketplace value. These women were raised in a manner which has a peaceful demeanor. They do not have the rebel spirit or the Jezebel spirit. They're easy to get along with. They bring a sense of serenity and peace. These women are feminine. They're raised on traditional values. They're raised to understand the value and the importance of a unit and a family. They understand, and they were raised on how to be successful in your relationship. They know how to get along with men. As a matter of fact, these women, when around other women, find that other women carry out acts of service for them on their behalf. Now, this is key. It's not unusual to find an attractive woman is surrounded with offers from men for acts of service. The man wants to do X and buy this and do that, carry your luggage, etc. Why? Based on beauty, not based on your femininity, not based on your feminine energy. Women who were raised to be wives find that when they are around men, those men provide, protect, and provide a priestly level of authority over them. When they are around other women, they also find that women generally provide a protective level of responsibility towards them. They get this from both men and women because they were raised to be a wife. Now let me move to attitude. What I've covered so far, and it's not all inclusive. This is just a few things you can see initially to understand. But perhaps before I move forward, let me give you some other clues on the non-sexual marketplace value issue. Most women in the West are aggressive in a temperamental perspective. The temperament is aggressiveness. They come not in good faith, but they come with a war type perception and persona. Everything has to be argumentative. Everything is on the premise that everything is zero sum. Both parties cannot benefit. Even in dating, they come on the proposition that, well, the man is here for sex, as though sex is something that is taken from a woman as opposed to something that is enjoyed. Women who are raised to be wives generally have a masculine disposition. This is women who generally infer and call themselves independent, strong. They will say things such as, I don't need a man, I can be fine all by myself. Whereas women who were raised to be wives are very happy and are very open about being vulnerable and saying, I need a man. And so it's important to keep that in mind. Now let me move to attitude, because I think this is important, because I segue and I build on what I just addressed. How do you identify a person's attitude? Well, you start by interaction with the person. Women who are not raised to be wives do not know or understand the word honor. Respect is earned. Honor is given. Honor is recognizing what makes you unique and different from another. Women who are raised to be wives are very observant. They're very intuitive. They observe, they intuit, and then they gift. They give you the gift of honor. Women who are raised to be wives are discerning. They are of good judgment. They have wisdom. And because they have wisdom being the ability to recognize what is different in a space, environment, amongst people. And honor being how you reward and how you acknowledge that uniqueness between people. Women who are disagreeable in their spirit were not raised to be wives. They have a Jezebel spirit. And what you tend to find is that women who were raised to be wives have a peaceful, loving spirit. My observation has been most women, at least 80% of most women in the West, especially in the UK, have a disagreeable nature. They have a disagreeable spirit because they've been raised in this feminist ideology, and everything has to be a fight. The men are evil, masculinity is bad, and this goes on and on. And this brings me to point number 2, which is that they lack the feminine spirit, the soft spirit. I have met a number of women, and I have been stunned at how women do not understand the difference between influence power and dominant power. Men come with dominant power because it's in our nature to lead. Women lead and rule with influence power. Influence power is more effective than dominant power because dominant power is too direct and often achieves the opposite of what it wants. Influence power, on the other hand, is subtle, is effective, and it can stand the test of time. It's loving and kind, which is partly why, if you go across time, amongst the greatest of kings and people, there was always a woman behind the scene who influenced his decision. Why? Influence power. Women who were raised to be wives understand influence power. Women who were not raised to be wives want to act like men and choose dominant power, which is why you tend to find there's a lack of feminine spirits. There's always a clash when you meet such women because they think it's a competition. They have bought into this silly mantra of equality, so much so that they would say that there is no difference between men and women. Women who were raised to be wives understand the function of a man, the function of a woman, and what the unit of both is supposed to do. Women who were raised to be wives, and this is number 3, have an appreciation for the male experience. Women who were not raised to be wives do not understand the journey of the male experience. Key, if you're choosing a wife or choosing a woman and you're shortlisting women based on potential for wifey, it's important to understand that you have to judge her on whether she understands the male journey and experience. By that, what I mean is, a woman who was raised in a proper way does not place undue burden on a man. Let me say that again. In the West, social media has exacerbated and increased a taste for a lifestyle that is far above what most people should be looking to have. You find women place on inordinate pressure and burden on a man to achieve. They choose a lifestyle that far exceeds what a man can provide. They do not want to build with a man, and I don't object to that. But what they want is a preformed man, but they do not take into account where he is in his journey. And this is why you find men who are on their purpose, on their grind, achieving success, building it slowly as it should be. They meet a woman, and because of the lifestyle she wants to lead, he is forced to leave his purpose, leave his vision, get off the track that he has been on for years, and pursue the instant gratification pathway because he needs to earn more, do more, just to make her happy. Invariably, she's never satisfied and she moves on to the next person after she's wrecked his entire focus, vision, mission, and future. A woman who appreciates a man's experience and understands and places a man in the right space in her head is supportive of a man's journey. A woman who does not understand the journey of masculinity will place inordinate burdens on the man, so much so that he would fail eventually because he's constantly looking for approval, love, affirmation. Men, you have to choose women who were raised to be wives and specifically who understand the burden that men go through and who sympathize with that burden. For example, one of the reasons I make a distinction about age amongst men is because I understand what that burden is. I don't expect a man who's 25 to be performing at the same standard and level as a man who's 35 or a man who is 45. It takes time to build, to grow, to network, to save, to invest, and even to come into your manhood. A woman, therefore, who places too much is asking you to run when you're still learning how to crawl. She has no empathy, she has no sympathy, she has no appreciation of what you go through, and she will force you down the pathway where you fail. Now, number 4 is women who go against the traditional values and virtues that women of old had. There's a women who would generally say, well, I don't cook, I don't clean, you have two hands, do it yourself. Obviously, I don't think a woman is known or should be judged by her ability to cook or clean, because those are very trivial issues. It's the attitude. I'm not talking about the actions, it's the attitude. What she's indicating is that she's not there to work with you. These same women want you to open the door, they want you to go out and bring home the bacon, they want you to protect them if there's an intruder, they want all the benefits of chivalry and traditional values, but they want none of the responsibilities. It's an attitude. They were not raised to be wives. Avoid such women. They go against traditional and traditional values, traditional virtues. They want no responsibility. They want freedom. Women who always seek freedom were not raised to be wives. You see, husband is a function, it's a role. It comes with guardrails. It's a responsibility, it's a duty, and it's an obligation. Wife is a responsibility, it's a duty, it's an obligation. Women who want freedom were not raised to be wives. Avoid such women. Now this brings me to number 5, which is women who are looking for partnerships rather than leadership, followership arrangements. Very key. I have seen a lot of young men make the mistake of dating women who are looking for 50-50 partnerships. Well, if you were starting a business, I have no objections to that. However, husband-wife is not a partnership. It's a union. It's an institution. Husband-wife are functions. There's a hierarchy. There's a leader. There's a follower. There's a vision and a mission. The husband submits to the mission or the vision. The wife submits to the vision or the mission through the husband. There's a hierarchy. And a woman who does not believe in the hierarchy was not raised to be a wife. She's a modern woman. And recognize, I'm talking about men who want to be successful. Modern relationships, I do not consider those in the category of relationships I would recommend for the men that I love. I do not. Because it's an experiment. It's no different from socialism and communism. Theory and practice. Good theory, but in practice it fails. It is a lovely theory, the idea that everything will be perfect and everyone will be happy. Great in theory. Yogi Berra said that in theory, there is no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. Women who were raised to be wives want a husband. They want and they understand submission. They understand that the vision, the mission comes first. From a hierarchical perspective, the husband comes second. He's called the house bond, the one who binds the house together, and he's the foundation. She comes third. The children come fourth. The children report to the mother reports to the father actually is responsible to the mission of the vision. For those who believe in some form of theological position, you have a deity. The hierarchy flows downwards. Finally, number 6, women who do not want to have kids, or women who only want to have one child. A woman who does not want to be a mother is no different from a man who does not want to be a father, in which case, I don't see the need for marriage. You can just be together and have a great time. I would say men who do not want to have children were not raised to be husbands. They were not raised to be family men. In the same manner, women who do not want to have children were not raised to be wives, and they do not want to be mothers. Different category. But women who want to have one child, and only one child, are selfish women. You see, in the West, this has become an epidemic. There's a difference between having only one child because that's all you could have. But I tend to find among younger women, for selfish purposes, because they do not like the responsibility, they do not like the inconvenience, they want to enjoy their lives, they don't want any burden, they would only give a man one child. You see, women of old who were raised to be wives, and we thank development in innovation and science. There was a time in the 1940s and pre the 1940s where a woman had to have 6 children, and at that time she had 6 and 4 died. two survived. Prior to the 1940s, the advancements we had come forward with regards to antibiotics and all the sanitation and all the technologies that make life easy were not available. So people died. You had a child, the likelihood that the child actually grew up past 6 around the turn of the century, the likelihood was roughly less than 20%. So you had to have many, in order to have a probability of success and survival. Women these days have all the modern benefits of innovation and technology and health and healthcare and the abundance of wealth, but they do not want the responsibility, because being a mother comes with some sacrifices, and most modern women do not want to have any of those sacrifices associated with them. Therefore, as a man, I'd like you to walk away from such women. They were not raised to be wives. You see, wives do not think from the perspective of negativity. They do not think from the perspective of entitlement. They tend to be open. They don't start off with the presupposition that they can control or choose how many children that they will have. They only assume, if my husband wants to have more children, and if we can afford it based on his analysis, then I would give my husband the gift of more children. But most importantly, I would enjoy the gift of motherhood. Now, obviously, you're limited by your lifestyle and your earning ability as a unit. Women who start off with a presupposition, and I see this amongst very young women, 25, 26, they haven't actually gotten into relationships, and they're saying, well, I'm not going to have any children, but the max I will have is one. And they always have a long list of reasons. Avoid such women if you are a man. Now, let me bring today's session to a close by saying as follows. When you meet women, you want to judge their actions based on their results or outcomes, and you want to judge their attitude based on your interaction. The temperament of a woman is fundamental in understanding what she would do over the long term. You look to her past to judge on the future, and you look to her attitude to determine what the present and the immediate future might be. Now, I hope that's been useful.